In this video, we're going to look at pronunciation. I do often start these videos with a question or questions that we get asked. With pronunciation, often the questions are very vague. I don't think it's something that people really understand. So I'm going to address some of the questions, but I'm going to spend the bulk of the video just talking about what pronunciation actually is and how the whole range of pronunciation features actually applies to a very, very low-level beginners. So the two of the most common questions we get relate to accent and phonics. So let me talk about accent first. The questions about accent could relate to where are the teachers from? Do they have an American accent? Do they have a British accent? Are they a native speaker? And remember that native speakers have lots of different accents. You have a lot of native speakers, for example, in India. And with student accent, often the question relates to, I want my child, or I want myself, to sound American or to sound British. Now, the problem with that is that it doesn't matter whether your teacher is British or American, your accent isn't acquired. You don't learn your accent from your teacher. You might say a few words, like for example, bath as opposed to bath, or can't as opposed to can't, in a certain way, but it doesn't impact your accent. If I had to move to Australia right now, there's a likelihood my children will sound Australian. I won't. The simple reason is because you learn your accent from your peers, your friends, the people around you. Now, there's nothing wrong with having a Taiwanese accent, but if your accent is unclear and people don't understand what you're saying, then it's a problem. So when we look at pronunciation, we look at two things. Can you understand other people who speak English? And are you clear enough to understand two other people? It doesn't matter where they're from. And then in relation to phonics, we do use phonics. Phonics is something that's very good to use, in my personal opinion. But a lot of phonics programs fail, and there is a lot of research that shows phonics is perhaps not that successful. And very often that's the case in places where English isn't spoken. If you can already speak English, like for example, if you're a kid in Australia or in the UK, and you then learn phonics, you're basically learning how to assign letters to the sounds that you already know. Now, if you don't know the sounds, then, or you don't know the words, then it doesn't actually help. So for example, if you've learned the letters B, A, and N, so B-A-N-N, and I give you the word B-A-N-A-N-A, you're probably going to pronounce it as ba-na-na, which it's not, it's banana. But if you learned phonics and you already know the word banana, or you already know the word cat, then it is successful. It's actually very, very successful. So our phonics program focuses not only on the sounds, but also getting students to understand the meaning of words and those words in sentences and sentences. So let's look very quickly then at what is pronunciation. I'm going to talk about a few things. The most important thing with pronunciation, like I said earlier, is can I understand you and can you understand me? So to break that down, we get individual sounds, like the sounds of the language, a, b, k, d, e, a, e, ch, those kinds of sounds of the language. And then how those sounds are put together to make words. Common problems sometimes is the mispronunciation of sounds like sh and ch, or sometimes adding sounds to words like support when you mean sport, or doggo or gooder when it should be dog or good. And actually a very common one actually is orangey instead of orange. The second thing, word stress. And a very common example, if I look online or if you go to sessions that talk about pronunciation, is the example of something like record or record. So record, what I'm doing right now, record, if you run the fastest, for example. But even at very, very low levels, like the example I gave earlier with banana, there's an example of na being stressed, banana. It's not apple, but apple. So word stress is very important even for beginners. The moment something has two syllables or more, word stress becomes important. Sentence stress then is just stressing the important words in the sentence, at least initially, in terms of what it means. So for example, I wake up at 7. But it also impacts the meaning of things sometimes. So for example, let's go back to accent, can't versus can't. If I say, I can play the piano, then in the positive, the can is not stressed. I can play the piano. Playing piano is stressed. If I say the negative, the can't is stressed. And often you might not even hear the t, especially if the next word starts with a t or a d sound. So the negative would be can't play the piano or I can play the piano. If we look at the next one, connected speech, a lot of the times with intermediate and above, this appears in textbooks and there's lots of practice, but it is something that appears even with beginners. So for example, next to is not pronounced next to. The one T disappears and they link together to become next to, almost like one word. And even something as simple as an apple, when you hear people say it, it will sound like an apple, an apple. So connected speech, even for low-level learners, are important. And then the very last thing that I'd like to close the video with is when we read or listen and we think about grammar and vocabulary, it is your brain working. Your brain is doing the decoding. But if we think about pronunciation, pronunciation is a lot more physical. It's a lot more like riding a bicycle. When you're riding a bicycle, you don't think about keeping your balance, when to pedal, when. It's just something that your muscles are used to doing. And pronunciation is very, very similar in your throat, in your mouth, your tongue, the way that your teeth and your lips come together or go apart, and how they do that to produce different sounds to make words is muscle memory. It's something that requires practice. So again, one of the reasons why we do have a lot of speaking practice in the class is because it gives us the opportunity to let students practice, to get used to that muscle memory. And at times when we do drilling, it's to make sure that they don't struggle with certain words because of the fact that maybe the way that their muscles have to move is something they're not used to. So for example, a word like extra that has k, st, r, 4 vowel sounds right next to each other is something that sometimes just requires practice for your muscles to get used to saying it.